Good afternoon. It's Thursday, the 14th of April 2016, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Gerrish. With me in the studio, Mike Robinson. Well, we will be joined shortly by Guy Taylor, who we are delighted to say was released from Swansea Prison earlier this morning, or earlier today. And he'll be giving us an update on that extraordinary court case, which led to him being given 7 days for contempt of court. But before we move on to Guy and the rest of the news, the weather at the moment, sunny in Plymouth. It's very sunny in Hereford, where Guy Taylor is. Hampshire is doing well, but at the moment it seems that much of Wales, at least, is cloudy. And I'm short of reports from across the rest of the country. So could be sunny, could be cloudy, Mike.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll just bring his face on screen for those of you who don't know Guy Taylor. Here he is, and this was just our opening slide to say that he's been released from prison. Here he is actually leaving the gates, and I'm quite sure in his hand he's got some very, very interesting notes that he will have been making. We'll just say to people that what sort of prison is Swansea? Well, we didn't have to look far to see that it isn't necessarily a safe environment. This is a prison inmate was found dead in his cell a few days ago. He was only 40 years of age. At the moment, there are no details of the cause of death, but of course, death in prison cells is not uncommon. Well, Guy, I can imagine you're very pleased to be out, and the sun is shining for you.
It is. The sunshine always favours the brave, apparently, Brian.
Well done. Well, just before we get back to the court case itself, tell us what your experience was like in Swansea Prison.
Swansea Prison itself, I'd never been there before. I got dragged across from Aberystwyth to Swansea in one of these sweat boxes, these metal box container things. When I got there, they were very, very good, very sort of nice, sort of little local prison, as it were. The governor was one of the first people to come and introduce himself to me, shook my hand and said, "You'll be out Thursday morning," which is a bit of a shock because I thought that 7 days as a civilian prisoner, which is what I was, apparently. I was there by consent, apparently. I didn't think, I thought I had to do the whole 7 days. But anyway, so yeah, inside the prison, the food was okay. I'd heard about the guy possibly committing suicide, but I can't confirm that when I was in there. All very nice and sort of neat, and people aren't allowed to smoke in there anymore, which I thought might have caused them a problem. But they've had that going for 3 weeks now, so I've heard there's been a few scenes, but we don't know. I mean, people are under pressure in there, and they can't even smoke. I suppose I'm not a smoker myself, but I can imagine that would cause great stress to people. But the prison itself was very efficient as far as the prisons are. I was locked up with a Polish lad who could hardly speak any English, and all his relatives were abroad, and he didn't really know what to do, so I was trying to help him. So it occupied my time amongst taking notes over what had actually happened in the court, and with the police and with the Reliance guys, or Amy guys they were. I kept plenty of notes of it, so I've got plenty to go through now. I'm back home.
Guy, thank you for that. And you did receive some mail, I believe, from supporters and people concerned at what had happened to you.
The most emotional time I can honestly say I've ever had in prison was when I received mail from the public, from people I don't know. They sent me proper goodwill messages, cards, money, and I know that the whole system was blocked up with people ringing while I was in there, and that the court and the prison. So, I mean, I'm humbled by the support that I've had, including from you guys. I mean, I really am humbled.
Well, Guy, at the end of the day, you've been putting your neck on the line in so many ways by simply telling the truth about what's been going on. Everything from these corrupt mortgages to the corruption in Britain's judicial and court system. So let's come back to the court case itself. Tell us in your own words. We've heard from other people, members of the public who were present in the magistrates' court. We've heard from them what took place, but perhaps you tell us in your own words. And one of the things we've got to show our viewers today is part of an email, which is a complaint that's already been sent through to the court service complaining about the conduct of the clerk, Mr. Cray. So what actually happened in that court that you then ended up in prison?
Well, just to rewind very briefly, I'd been arrested for something I'd never been for failure to surrender to bail originally, a month before, and they surrounded my house. They said I'd not surrendered to bail back in January. I said I'd never been on bail, I'd never been arrested, never been charged, never been interviewed, I didn't know what it was about, never received a summons. But the police arrested me, didn't show me a warrant, which was an abuse under section 13.5 of the criminal procedure rules, and they dragged me over to Aberystwyth then. And I said, I don't know what this case is about, I don't know anything about it, so what's going on? And the clerk of the court, and we had plenty of people there on that day as well, Salon and Tom Crawford, including them, and David Morgan. They said that I would receive all paperwork, because obviously you can't plead to something if you don't know what it's about, without first seeing the evidence. And I hadn't received anything. So at that point, they bailed me to appear back on the 11th, and the clerk of the court, a woman at that time, I said that I'd require we'd need business in the court, prior to the hearing on the 11th, and we'd need a Turnbull hearing, and we'd need possibly a Galbraith hearing, which that means I'd be questioning the identity of what's going on, because I knew nothing about it. It was agreed, I didn't plead. I said I'm not going to plead something I don't know anything about, which was accepted, and they said come back on the 11th and you will have all the paperwork by the 4th. Well, of course, the 4th came and went, and I never received anything. So the first business before the court when we went there on the 11th was to establish that I didn't know what this case was about and I hadn't received any paperwork. It was really that simple. And that's business before the court, before the case begins. So myself and Linda travelled over. We set off for about 6 o'clock in the morning, got to Aberystwyth, rushed into court. We were first in the court. There was a little bit of discord straight away because the usher told Linda to sit somewhere, and then the clerk started shouting she had to go in the public gallery or she'd be removed. And that was a bit concerning, but okay, I sat there. Now, I said, I've business before the court, and I was shouted down. And he said, right, your name is Guy Taylor, your date of birth is. I said, listen, I can't confirm or deny the date of birth. I said, I accept you've probably got the 28th of the 9th, 62 on there, and I can accept it for these proceedings, but I'm not confirming that is my date of birth.
Guy, if I can just interject there, when you say he, you're actually talking about this gentleman, Mr. Cray, the clerk, is that right?
That's right, Brian, yeah. I apologise for that. I should have explained in more detail. Yeah, the clerk, this Mr. Cray, said, started getting a bit heated at that point and saying to me, well, you're trying to make trouble. No. I said, look, I'm happy to go along because I actually wanted the thing dealt with. He then said, guilty or not guilty? Do you plead guilty or not guilty? I said, well, I can't enter a plea because I don't know what this case is about. I've received no information. So he then started shouting over me, oh, he's causing trouble. I want him removed from the court. So I looked at the magistrate at this point, a gentleman and 2 people with him. And he looked at me and, I mean, because the guy was acting like he was on drugs. I mean, he was really shouting and getting upset. And you could see everyone, no one felt comfortable in the building. And it was quite simple, really. There was business before the court. Simple as that. So they removed me and they put me in the box, the glass box there. So I was in there and they cleared the court. And then I was saying, listen, I'm happy to just sit there and go through this, but no one was listening to me. They called the police. The police all came in, probably about half a dozen of them. Now, at this point, I was feeling quite dry. I'd driven from 6 in the morning. I just got there, and I wasn't expecting this at all. I was expecting it to be a normal court case. You know, taking into account, I've dealt with hundreds of court cases all over the country, so I certainly wasn't expecting this palaver. I mean, as I say, I could probably get a reference from some courts, Hereford and Worcester. I probably could, yeah, because of the amount of business I've done in there. But anyway, I said, "Can I have a drink of water?" And no one would give me a drink of water, and I was trapped in the box with no one in there with me. And this went on then for half an hour. So for half an hour, they were saying that they couldn't open the door because where I was locked, they didn't have a key. But at the end of half an hour, didn't need a key because it opened from that side of the court. But anyway, I'd said to the police at this point, "I want you to stay in the court and I want you to witness proceedings, because I said there's something going on in here. I don't know what it is, but I want you to witness. I don't feel correct, and I feel that my safety is in danger." And anyway, cut a long story short, from that, from all the interactions, the police were then told to take me into custody. So I, at this point, then said, "What am I being arrested for?" And the police said, "You're not being arrested." I said, "Well, then no, I shouldn't be in your custody." I said, "If you're arresting me for contempt of court, then fine. I'll be offered the opportunity to explain my actions in the police station." And then this clerk jumped up again. No, you're not arresting him for contempt. He's been held in contempt." And they whipped me off through the back doors. The police then took me into the police VAT vehicle and down the police station. The police were, to be honest with you, great. And they know about this, what I was saying, that there's basically a network, there's a cabal all over the country, which we know about, of these characters that have infiltrated the court system, the police, the whole judiciary. And the police down there didn't put me in. They processed me. I said, "You've moved me from the court when I'm supposed to be in the court's custody." Right? They said, "We accept that, but there's no court staff there in the cells." I said, "Well, in that case, you've transported me, and you're probably not even insured to do so." Anyway, they were very nice, the coppers. The sergeant made me a cup of tea, and about 6 or 7 of them stood around talking to me about what was going on. And they were very shocked themselves. But they were well aware of, they call themselves the Tafia, apparently, up there. These characters, the guys who have usurped our court system, I suppose, really and truthfully. And they took me back to the courts. And then we went through that process then where they said to me that they'd found me guilty in my absence because I'd failed to turn up for the case.
I'm just, I'm at that point, Guy. Of course, I'm laughing here, but this is so serious. So you're held in custody, and then they find you guilty in your absence because you failed to turn up. Did I?
Exactly.
Right, I did hear that correctly.
Yeah, you heard that correctly, Brian. That's exactly what they do.
Right. Okay. And so what happens after that? Because there's another part to the case.
Yes. So then, what I'd done at this point, I'd said I want to see the duty solicitor. Now, the last time I'd been brought in, I said I want to see him, not to represent me, but I wanted him to make a record because he's an officer of the court. He can make a record of what was going on. And I'd asked for the same guy, I forget his name, Gethwin, I think it is, Gethwin Davis, I think his name is. Very nice chap. He completely conferred with everything I was saying. And he said, "I'll go and find out what I can, and then I'll sit there and make a record of what's going on your behalf. I'm not representing you, but I'll do that." And I said, "Thank you." And he came back and he said, "Right, well, they found you guilty in your absence, so they'll have to deal with that. But they'll also charge you with contempt." And I said, "Well, have they charged me?" And he said, "Well, yes, but this becomes where it becomes a grey area because I was being held in contempt, not charged with contempt." So he said, "You'll then be asked if you will apologise to the court." And he said, "I presume you won't." I said, "Well, I'll say that I don't know what the hell's going on." He said, "Fine." He said, "At that point, the magistrates will be kicked out of the court and they will get new magistrates to listen to that." So I said, "Right, but the problem isn't with the magistrates, the problem is with the clerk." And he'll still be running the circus in there. And he agreed with me, and he said, "I've said to them, you realise this man will appeal?" And they said, "Yes." And he said, "But then he's going to have the contempt charge placed on him." He said, "Yes, but this man will appeal." And he said, they didn't seem to comprehend what he was saying. So he said, "I completely agree with what you're saying on this, and I will be in there taking notes." So they then dragged me into the court to be sentenced for the thing that I'd been found guilty of in my absence because I'd failed to attempt. And they fined me, I don't know what the they were talking hundreds of this and mounts of that, and I couldn't really hear through the glass box. How long? What was my income? I said, well, basically it was none of their business, but I haven't got an income. So how will you pay the fine? I said, well, if I get an appeal through in 28 days, then I'll pay it. So I put a proviso on it. So they accepted that, because of course I won't get an appeal through within 28 days. But of course, I then had to be dealt with for the contempt issue. And of course, no, I'm jumping the gun here. I actually got pulled into the box then to be dealing with the contempt. When they allowed me to speak then, in front of these new magistrates. So I went into the box, I explained, listen, I don't know what this matter's about, I should never have been found guilty of it. All I was doing was questioning what evidence there was, because I can't defend something I know not what it is. And I was shouted over by this clerk. I said I've reported him to the police, which I did do. I said I reported him for kidnapping and unlawful imprisonment. He then got really upset when he realised I'd done that and said, oh, you've reported me to the police. And I said, yes, I have. And what more have you done to me? So this went on, and they had to listen to what I had to say, although they said, well, this is a separate case now, separate case. You've already been, that's nothing to do with now. I said, well, it is, because it's the circumstances that are leading up to why I'm here for this alleged contempt of whatever it is. And I then explained to them, well, you know, if I said, listen, when I was shouted over, when I was told that I couldn't plead, I had to plead, when I know that we all got the right to remain silent, but it wasn't a case of that. I was just saying that I didn't know what I was pleading to. I said, and this gentleman was telling me that I had to plead. Obviously, I knew I didn't, and he's wrong in law. And that's simple as that. I said, I did get passionate about it when I got dragged off to the box. And I may have called him a clown, which is what he had said. But I can assure you that I wasn't trying to upset anybody. I was the one who was intimidated and being bullied and threatened. So I was the one. But if my passion in any way came across to any way frighten anybody, then I can apologise. And he said, well, I'm not prepared to accept that apology. So I thought, well, hang on, it's not you I'm apologising to, it's the court, isn't it? I said it was 6 of one and half a dozen of another. And then he was then started to cross-examine me, which was an insane thing to do, really. And then he started to give evidence about it. And of course, the magistrates then retired. And prior to that, a lady who I didn't recognise as being in the court earlier, but she may have been, gave evidence that I'd been upset and that I wasn't able to wasn't given a drink, but that I wasn't complying with pleading guilty or not guilty. But I mean, the clerk in the court, literally in the face of the court, was it's almost like these people don't know what the truth is. The solicitor who was taking the records of it in the back of the court, he said to the magistrates, Mr. Taylor had previously pleaded not guilty to this. And I said, no, I hadn't, because I hadn't. I'd said I needed whatever documents they had to plead anything. And he said that I'd been represented by the duty solicitor, which I looked at the duty solicitor and he shook his head. So he said, obviously, he'd received any information on the case. And so I shouted across to the solicitor, have you received anything? And he shook his head and said, no. So this palaver was going on in front of the magistrate. So that was, he was telling lies. Everything he came out of his mouth was an absolute lie. But I mean, the whole situation had been contrived and they conspired to create a narrative. And that's what we can prove. And this is why they can send me on a regular basis down to Swansea prison for a few days if they want to expose themselves in this way. Because, I mean, that's all that's happened. And the campaign for what's going on has increased amazingly. Amazing.
Guy, thank you very much for giving us such a detailed account of what took place. And of course, this is unbelievably serious because it represents a complete breakdown of of justice and law and order in this country. This is the same country, of course, where David Cameron is standing on a world stage telling other leaders of sovereign nations how to run their business. This is the obscenity of David Cameron's Conservative government. But I'm just going to bring on screen part of an email. This has been sent into the court service. It's only an excerpt from it, but it's been sent to Natalie Tierney, I think her name is there, Chief Executive of the court service, and it's in relation to the clerk, Michael Creagh. And the person who sent this email in, a complaint, says, well, let's look at the standards that are expected of public servants. They declare that they were themselves a public servant of over 30 years. So the following standards: honesty, impartiality, openness, accountability, accuracy, fairness, integrity, transparency, objectivity, reliability, were all broken by Michael Creagh in his conduct with you in the court. And I think you might be interested about this because a number of people took a in-depth look at Mr. Creagh and were horrified to see the sort of things that was on his Facebook social media page, where clearly he has got friends in Dyfed and Powys Police, so that's all very cosy. But he's also got some very dubious content, such as Naughty Pembroke and Naughty Penner and Bufferland. Now this is to do with sexual matters, I believe swingers. I may be wrong on that, but we won't go too deep into what we and other people saw. But also he's quite happy to suggest that if you're a Tory, you should be culled. And he's also been making derogatory remarks about David Cameron as Prime Minister. So this is just one excerpt from the material that's now been given to the court service. But on all the points that you've raised and members of the public have raised, this man was not fit to be in the court. And the next question we have to ask is, how is it the clerk was able simply to rule the roost over the magistrates present? Just a short reply, Guy, and then we must move on with the news.
Yeah, I mean, wow. I mean, I've got a lot to catch up on. I've only just got home, right? And thank you for that. And yes, I mean, you know, public standards and public life. Who is this guy? What is he about? And why was he allowed to go there? Apparently, he was new to the court. Apparently, the court staff in there said they didn't know him. So, I mean, this goes on. It was, as I said, it was contrived and it was conspired as a narrative for what happened that day. And thank you, the people who are looking into this stuff. We need to know who these people are, yeah. And what they're dictating over our lives. We need to know who they are, and this is wonderful, wonderful stuff.
Well, this is the power of exposure, and for our viewers and listeners who do ask us regularly, what can we do? What can we do? We have a perfect example here. It isn't the government, it isn't local authorities, it isn't the court system that are doing the damage, that are involved in the corruption. Of course, it's individuals, it's real people, and they have names and they have home addresses. So exposure is a very powerful thing, and it's amazing what can be found on the internet with a little bit of research. Guy, thank you very much for that. We'll let you go. I'm sure you need a coffee and at least 2 chocolate biscuits to get over that experience. But thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Speak to you later.
Okay. Well, just incredible, Mike, isn't it? When you see the sheer hypocrisy of Britain's MPs at work. They have no understanding of this, apparently.
Absolutely. Total change of subject then, or possibly not, but Syria, war, and so on. Yesterday, the Wall Street Journal had this article, produced this article, and this has come as a result of a leak of information from the White House, apparently, that a Plan B is being prepared for Syria, just in case there's some kind of problem with the ceasefire. And to quote from this, it says, the private message conveyed by US officials to the Russian counterparts who have backed the Assad regime with air power since last year has been that the moderate opposition isn't going away and that a return to full-scale fighting could end up putting more Russian pilots in danger. This was according to US officials. So this is a direct threat now to Russians that if you're operating in Syria, that you could be at risk because the moderate opposition isn't going away. And in fact, what this article goes on to say is that Plan B involves arming these moderate terrorists with surface-to-air missiles.
Yeah, this is the trick from Afghanistan, of course, is providing these handheld surface-to-air missiles, which can be very dangerous.
Absolutely.
But what a state of affairs where we have terrorists who have been put in place clearly with the financial and military support of the British and American governments, now being given more weapons in order to make them more dangerous and to help inflame the fighting. David Cameron's hand behind this with Michael Fallon, I would imagine?
Quite possibly. In the meantime, at about the same time that article was published, Obama was visiting the CIA headquarters in Langley, and he was there to discuss how urgent it is to stop Russia and the Syrian government from sort of consolidating their situation in Syria. And of course, he used enough weasel words in his eventual press conference to allow the mainstream media to print this type of headline: causes lost for Islamic State, as Obama says. So he couched it in particular language, suggesting that ISIS is beaten. Now, I seem to remember at least one other US president saying similar things about Al-Qaeda, and yet they still seem to be around, or at least we're told they are. And perhaps this validates what you just said, Brian, and gives us a clue as to what's going on here, because this is the Global Coalition website. It is run by the British government, of course, and it says there in the text at the bottom there, the Global Coalition Against Daesh was formed in September 2014 and is unique in its membership scope and commitment. Together, the Global Coalition is committed to degrading and ultimately defeating Daesh. So I think that's very carefully chosen words, Brian. What they have created is this perpetual enemy that ultimately they want to defeat at some point in the future, perhaps. But correct me if I'm wrong, but the US and the UK had a coalition in the 1940s, which destroyed one of the largest fighting forces on the planet, and yet we don't seem to be able to destroy ISIS.
Well, we can't destroy ISIS, Mike. And of course, the other clue we get to this utter nonsense is the situation over pirates. That apparently in 2016 we've got such tenacious and vicious pirates operating in the Gulf area that they can't be defeated by combined American and NATO navies. This is, of course, absolute nonsense. There's something else going on here. These people are being allowed to exist, and we could discuss what's been going on in the insurance industry for major shipping, but another time maybe.
And of course, one of the new front, which is being pushed by Britain at the moment, is the Lebanon, because the spread of terrorism from Daesh represents a threat to us all, and Lebanon is on the front line. Lebanon is an important defence ally, and we've increased our support to help develop the Lebanese armed forces so they're able to strengthen their borders and protect their people. That's according to Michael Fallon. He has been in Lebanon for the last couple of days. Interestingly, a couple of days ago, he was saying that they were going to support Lebanese education, and that didn't make me feel terribly comfortable. But anyway, he is now saying that they're going to support the Lebanese military. And this was part of what he describes as the continuing battle against ISIS. And he met with the Lebanese Minister of Defence, and he's going to strengthen the defence relationship between the two countries. So there you go. That's
so
really great.
but he's not talking Daesh, he's talking ISIS. So is ISIS moderate? Or is it Daesh that's moderate?
No, in fairness, that was my paraphrase. So, right. He is talking Daesh. So what they're talking about is £25 million to date for equipment, mentoring and training. It's always the mentoring and the training which
get those terrorists trained.
Well, no,
properly trained.
This is getting the Lebanese military trained, and of course they're getting trained in the common purpose, aren't they? And they're going to help them build and equip 3 land border regiments, and they're going to. This has been funded through the Conflict Stability and Security Fund, apparently. 20 short-term training teams are going to Lebanon each year to train the Lebanese army in counter-terrorism, search and rescue, and military intelligence. They're going to commit to spending more than £20 million to further bolster Lebanon's response from the threat from Syria and Iraq conflicts. And they're going to fund internal security and urban operations training. So that's another £7 million. So there's £1 million upon millions of pounds upon millions of pounds just dripping out of Michael Fallon.
Well, it's because it's for war, Mike. There's only a problem in UK when money's needed for
the disabled,
people who can't feed themselves, or the disabled, or schools, or the NHS. Then it's a problem. But obviously, when David Cameron and Fallon are ready for another war, money is completely no problem.
And the British again behind this time in Libya. This is the United Nations support mission in Libya, and the UK co-chairing a meeting which was held in Tunis on Tuesday this week. And that was to discuss how the international community could support the priorities set out by the new Libyan government of national accord, apparently. And that's going to bring peace, security, stability and prosperity to the Libyan people. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's only a few months ago that we were talking about bombing Libya once again.
Well, it goes up and down, Mike, doesn't it?
But it does seem to.
Libya destroyed, although they have had common purpose working, helping them rebuild the public infrastructure. I notice all the trees in that meeting, if I may, are crooked.
Yes. Nonetheless, in the meantime, here we go. That's a pretty impressive picture, I have to say.
It's fairly close.
Yes. So this is the propaganda against Putin continuing, and this time it's the US complaining about some Russian jets flying rather close to a ballistic military destroyer. And if you watch the video that's in this RT, this is right across the mainstream press, but if you look at the RT article there is a video in there. And at first glance, it might seem like the Pentagon has a point, but when you actually read the text of what RT and others have published, you discover that in fact what had happened was that the USS Donald Cook was sitting pretty within 50 miles of a Russian naval base.
Yeah.
So who was the aggressor here, Brian?
Well, it's provocation, isn't it, Mike? If you move military assets in close proximity to national borders, and particularly military installations, you are provoking. So is it surprising the Russians did something along the lines of a close fly past? I don't think so at all. This has been going on for some time now, the constant lie that Russia's the aggressor. And what do we see? We see NATO, British, US and NATO forces continually put right up on the Russian border. So no wonder the Russians are going to respond. And of course, we showed yesterday that massive, nearly $600 billion US, which was American defense spending. And Russia was in there, I think, at number 4 after China and Saudi. And yet we're being told that all of the trouble and the terrorism and the wars are Russian based. I do find it remarkable to sit here actually in 2016, Mike, and realise that the propaganda that's coming out in order to try and provoke, it would seem, some form of war with Russia. Against my background, it's a very interesting position to be in. But the most important thing is the truth. Well, one of the things we know going on at the moment is that, of course, Western defence is being based more and more on high technology. And I just thought I'd bring this one in from the Mail. It's the US Navy's giant new destroyer, USS Zumwalt, whatever that means. And this is heading into futuristic weapon system. It's built like that, it looks like that, so it has a particularly low radar signature, and apparently it's equivalent to a very small fishing boat, even though it is that size. But at the moment, of course, it doesn't have full systems. So this is a will-be-ready jam tomorrow weapon system. And this one ship, if I remember the figure correctly, is $4.3 billion US. So the thing to remember, of course, is this ship can only be in one place at one particular time, and to move around the world is going to take considerable time. So it does seem that we've got Western allies falling into the trap of increasingly expensive and weapons limited in number. This was the promotional part of the Mail article, that this ship is going to be equipped They believe in the future with what's called a rail gun, so they're replacing explosive charges in guns with electromagnetic pulse. And British Aerospace is in the running to provide the system for this ship. Interesting that at the same time we're getting a lot of information to say that the reduction in orders from British Aerospace by the British Ministry of Defence means that BAE's position is becoming increasingly untenable, and hostile buyers are already gathering. And the word on the streets is, of course, British Aerospace would go to an American buyer, which means that Britain is completely stripped of defence capability, in-house defence capability, and of course that will be another nudge towards the European military system. Well, let's bring in this gentleman, and here he is, Sir Alan West, former boss of the Navy. On your left is a Telegraph article which pointed out he'd done the fastest turnaround ever seen when in a morning he was saying he didn't really have confidence in 28 days detention for people accused of terrorism. But I think Gordon Brown had a quick word with him shortly after, and about an hour later he'd suddenly become personally convinced. But why we've got him on screen is that we know that he's been challenged, could have been earlier this morning or late yesterday. He's being challenged over the accelerating path of the Royal Navy into a unified EU military structure. And what has his response been? To run for cover. So we've got another senior military officer simply running away from the reality that his country is being given away to a foreign power. But of course, this is the very same man who, under his reign, major cuts in the Navy were reducing capability significantly.
Yes.
Treason, I think, is the word, Mike.
And corruption.
Indeed.
Well, Panama Papers, of course, continue to rumble on, and this is a fantastic little post from Guido Fawkes here about the BBC. I just thought we'd include this. It says Cameron's taxes and Panama Papers have led the BBC bulletins for the past week, yet licence fee payers remain unenlightened about Anti's own offshore financial arrangements. And he goes on to point out that they have investments with Nafila Capital Limited, £84 million of investments. Nafila Capital is a wholly owned subsidiary of Nafila Holdings Limited and is a Bermuda domiciled company. And Guido finishes by saying, as the BBC lines up pundits to jump on the outrage bus about Dave's £30,000 in a Panamanian unit trust, they stashed £84 million with investors based in Bermuda, and there's lots more of this to come. So there you go. There's no corruption in this country at all.
No, hardly any. And
No.
of course, if there is, the BBC is going to report it because the BBC appears to be corrupt.
Yes. But I mean, this isn't corruption, is it? Because this is dozens of MPs renting out their London homes, taking in the rental income, while claiming more than £1.3 million in expenses for hotel rooms, according to the Mail. 46 MPs using this expenses loophole, as it's described. Look, there are loopholes. You've got a set of rules. You can find loopholes in them. The question is whether your morality says that that's the right thing to do. And this is just pathetic that these MPs continue to go down this path, this corrupt path. You know, they've got brains in their heads, or at least they should have, or they shouldn't be MPs.
They shouldn't be MPs.
They shouldn't be MPs. So they're allowed to claim £20,600 a year in London rent, and £150 a night for hotels. And part of the Mail article here points out that many of these MPs bought these houses that they're renting out in the first place with the help of taxpayers' money, because the taxpayers' money was used to refurbish these properties. So this is pathetic. It should. The Mail gives credit to Channel 4 News for this, by the way. But let's not stop there, because today the government was pushing out a news story. Actually, it was yesterday. 10 facts you need to know about academies. I'm only going to talk about the first one, because the first myth that they talk about is that by making every school an academy, education is being privatized. They say that's a myth. They say that the fact is that academies are free, state-funded schools which are run by charitable trusts. They cannot be run for profit. Profit-making schools were explicitly ruled out in our manifesto and will continue to be charity law would expressly prevent this. The school system is not being privatised. Instead, heads and teachers are given greater freedom to run their schools. Of course, what they're given greater freedom for is to pay the heads of these so-called charities exorbitant amounts of money. But I just wanted to contrast that statement with this article. I mean, this article is from a couple of years ago, but this is talking about how academy trusts are being used as a vehicle for investors. And as I just read out a little bit of this, just compare this to what is being done in Panama and these other offshore shell companies, because that's basically what's going on here. These academy trusts are being used as vehicles where profits aren't being made by the charitable trust itself, but the profits are being made by the profit-making companies that are being employed by the charitable trusts or own the charitable trusts. So two examples that this little article gives here is Breckland Free School. Trustees handed over management to IES, a Swedish for-profit provider, which had been bought by a US private equity firm, a hedge fund. Another for-profit Swedish firm involved with academies is one that I can't pronounce. Its not-for-profit subsidiary Learning Schools Trust operates 4 academies. And so they go on to give other examples of this. So the academies, the not-for-profit academy trusts, are being used effectively to front up what is a profit-making operation, and for the government, therefore, to put out a press release saying that this is not privatisation. It's exactly the same type of corruption as these offshore, the same model as these offshore companies.
Blatant lies and propaganda, which is what pours out of Downing Street, isn't it, essentially,
Yes.
Mike? And it is privatisation, there is no doubt about that. We should also remember academy schools, if they become failing, parents can't do anything with them because they get 2 years to sort themselves out before even Ofsted can go in for another audit. So privatised and out of control of parents.
Now, this morning we had an email in from someone asking us to mention TTIP once again, so I'm going to do that, absolutely, because as part of the EU referendum PSYOP, Vince Cable is pushing TTIP as being this great, fantastic benefit to us all. He is saying that he gives the rationale for TTIP. He says the European Commission has prioritised a bilateral agreement with the USA. TTIP, which is proving a source of unexpected controversy. Is it really unexpected? Although negotiations are still in an early stage, the underlying objective is to apply on a transatlantic basis the same approach that helped to create the EU single market. So what he's saying is that the same approach which helped create the EU single market should be spread right across the world. This is a fantastic initiative and we should just get on with it. He says a whole lot of other things. I suggest you have a read at this. But at the end of the day, I'm just going to remind everybody once again that if you read David Cameron's Best of Both Worlds document, which is a document that describes the renegotiated relationship between the EU and Britain, that absolutely includes at its core TTIP as being right at the forefront of British trade policy. So if you vote yes in the referendum, you are voting yes for TTIP. And therefore, if you disagree with TTIP, you're going to find it very, very difficult to argue against it if you've already given your consent for it.
So spread the nonsense, the madness, and the breakdown.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, Mr. Chilcott.
Chilcott, as was reported a few days ago, apparently that report has been handed over to security services to decide whether there's anything in it which would be detrimental to national security, and so that might put it off for another year or something. Well, some people in the House of Commons are getting pretty upset about that. There's going to be a debate on this issue, and David Davis is leading that debate. He has warned of what he's calling uproar if that report is not released within the next few weeks. I mean, how much longer can they delay this for? It's so transparent what's going on. Well,
Mike, I've got to say, I wouldn't be surprised if they don't release it in the next few weeks, because that would nicely take all of the attention off the EU referendum. And of course, they don't want people to actually be considering this situation as to whether we should stay or leave Europe. There is only one answer, and that's to leave as fast as possible. So let's get Chilcot out and get people focused on something completely different. What can we do? Well, we'll come back to this subject of research, and thank you very much to the person who sent us this little trail. So here we are, RSA. It's 21st Century Enlightenment. The subject is Community Business Leaders Programme. The RSA, in partnership with Power to Change, Rio and Sheffield University Management School, is exploring the unique leadership challenges faced by community businesses. So here we've got big Quango charities who are here to help your local businesses. Well, let's have a look at it. It's well worth going to the website. Remembering that RSA, Royal Society for the Arts, was created back there in 1754 in a coffee house. Now remember, in those days, coffee was so expensive that it was only the rich society knobs that could actually go in there, and they were unlikely to have the best interests of the rest of us at heart. But not according to this, so you need to watch a video. We did watch quite a bit of this little inset video, and at a particular point where the marker is on screen, the commentator said this: behind our doors today you will still find a hotbed of new ideas and forward thinkers who share a common purpose. And at that point I more or less stopped listening, because I knew what I was now looking at. But have a look at some of the people. Don't take the UK column, just what we say. Go and have a look at these people yourselves, and actually have a look at their backgrounds. And it's quite extraordinary, because this man, who's been doing great work all over the place, but he's worked with the BBC, the BMA, Google, Training Foundation, Association of Colleges, can't find anything which gives him any qualifications or experience to do this. But he's the man who's been working with an independent team, Mike, in order to do a review of the police. So we can see where the police are going at the moment. Guy Taylor's helping to show us that. But here is this team. They're independent, but they've done the review. Well, this is how it connects together, and what we're really looking at is the implementation of big society, which is going to rule everything. So RSA linked to Power to Change. And what are they up to? Well, it's an independent charitable trust, which was given a mere 150 million, Mike, as you do, from the big lottery, and they're going to support community businesses to create better places across England. So it's all good stuff. They're going to look after us. Who's going to do that? Well, we've got this lady, Miss Alexon, Chief Executive. She was Chief Executive of Power to Change, became Chief Executive in January 2015, formerly Deputy Chief Executive at the independent think tank Resolution Foundation, and was also Mental Health Lead for Health Budgets Delivery Programme for NHS England. She's been with the US Department of Health and Human Services in Washington, so they'll be looking after our best interests there. And previously she worked at the UK Treasury and the Prime Minister's office. My goodness, she's been a busy lady.
She's very independent.
She is very independent. And let's have a look at that Resolution Foundation. Have a look at the people here, because you'll find they are all government men. There's one union man, but I would suggest he's also a quasi-government man. And if that's not enough, let's bring in Rio. They've been set up to basically help creative partnerships, and they're going to be looking at local businesses. We've got this lady here. Her qualification seems to be she's done a common purpose course. We've got David Nottage. Well, of course, he's been working with the BBC, ITV, Audi, Tesco, Renault, Kraft, IBM. So clearly he's got our best interests in heart, Mike.
He can't have been more than 3 months at a time at these places.
Well, 3 weeks maybe. But we just put in there, here's some of the partners. Plymouth City Council pops in there alongside the British Council. Rural England, more and more people looking after us. Well, of course, that's not what's going on. What is being built here is a huge social network. And if that is not bad enough, somebody else did some really good research looking into matters to do with social workers, and they've discovered an application that's being used. So here's the email. You can freeze it on your screen to see exactly what they said. But what were they concerned about? So I've just added that in. Dirty deeds are destroyed by exposure. So this is what we need to do. This is what they were concerned about. It's on the custody minefield, and it's an application, the multidisciplinary agency application for social workers. Go and have a look at what is being offered here. Download onto your iPhone access to thousands of records. NHS records, Mike. You're a social worker, you're having a cup of coffee and a fag, and you can dial up, well, Brian Gerrish's medical records.
It's all been pushed onto the cloud.
It's all being pushed onto the cloud. And the interesting thing is they even advertise how wonderful this app is. I think this social worker should have given her kitchen a good clean up before she went on the video. But basically, she's saying this is the best thing since sliced bread because any old social worker is going to have access to your data. But if you try and find out who made this app and who got the data, well, there's a wall of silence on the website.
Nice common purpose purple there.
Nice common purpose purple. I believe the lady's American, but she's just drifted into UK social services. Well, what's the connection with this? This is a pretty horrific story of a Met police officer who was chopped up, murdered and chopped up after going on a gay dating spree. This is the police officer, Semple, sorry, I got his name there, on the right of those two at a particularly interesting party. I'm just going to say we got the danger of the internet and social media, and now we're mixing that effectively with records being released to social workers. Why should we be concerned? Well, this is the latest paedophile case to be going on. It's a former Plymouth teacher, now been accused with other men of dozens of child sex attacks. I think about 35 children were involved in this. But what's very interesting is that amongst these men was a social worker. So we've got social workers and the system saying that they're all squeaky clean, but of course we know they're not. So we had Christian brothers, social worker and a physical education teacher all abusing children. Security services didn't know, Mike.
No.
How
could they?
Well, I don't know. I just worry a bit how they're going to manage to track down Daesh and ISIS, because they don't seem to be able to track down paedophiles all over the country, and particularly in Westminster. But it's just an anomaly, really. Some good news. Somebody else is really putting effort in. This is Robbie from Cornwall, who's produced an extremely interesting book, Challenging Vaccines. It's now freely available if you get in contact with him as in an ebook format. And there's some pretty amazing information in this book. There's a little comment here which says, just look at us, everything is backwards, everything is upside down, doctors destroy health, lawyers destroy justice, psychiatrists destroy minds, scientists destroy truth, and the major media destroys information, religions destroy spirituality, and governments destroy freedom. A pretty apt quote for today's news,
Absolutely.
I think.
Yeah.
And excuse me, we'll end today by saying, have you got your UK column pen and stylus? This is a very, very useful device, not only for writing, and of course you're going to need to be writing those letters to your politicians and other public officials pointing out corruption, but it's also a stylus, and you can prod your tablet screen safely.
Clearly we need to market these to social workers because they can use them to operate their new app.
This is true. The only thing I would say is the soft point is maybe not suitable for prodding David Cameron. You're going to need a sharper stick. But £3.50 from UK Column Shop. Very useful item. Perhaps you'd like to buy one. Thank you very much for joining us, and thank you for Guy Taylor and that extraordinary account of sheer corruption in a Welsh magistrate's court. We'll be back same time tomorrow. Bye-bye.